So racial profiling is a topic that I've been studying now for about 25 years. And I came to the topic as a social psychologist studying stereotyping and prejudice, and then confronting the issue of racial disparities in policing. And in my modeling and in one experiment that we were able to run, we show that racial profiling can actually cause a net increase in criminal offending because usually the people being profiled belong to a minority group. So if you're essentially facilitating or motivating a larger group, you could have a net increase in crime. But the data, the criminal justice data, will continue to show that minority group members are being arrested at higher rates because they're being stopped and searched at higher rates. And so that will perpetuate the stereotype because we'll look at the arrest rate as opposed to some kind of random sample of who's actually offending in the world.
Fundamentally, nothing has changed. The systems put into place and into every aspect of life in America disadvantages a person of color. Now, what happens when that happens? Leaving aside all the physical facts which one can quote, leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, what this does to the subjugated, the most private, the most serious thing this does to the subjugated is to destroy his sense of reality. It destroys, for example, his father's authority over him. His father can no longer tell him anything because the past has disappeared, and his father has no power in the world. This means, in the case of the American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white. And since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. Baldwin was prophetic, and as I told you earlier, the issues spoken about in this debate are as relevant today as they were in 1965. And Baldwin would probably say, see, I told you, and it's gotten worse, and you better, figure out a way to fix things.
I mean, it's not, he gives an incredible history lesson. And, and the further we are from that history, the more we need to hear it. And I think probably, at least on the Baldwin side, why he might say the same things today is because we may have gotten even worse in terms of forgetting some of those things now because we're 50 years further on. But that history, that how we got there and how we got here is maybe one of the most important things that he has to say. It certainly was for me. I felt like I got such an education from hearing Greig do that speech over and over again.
So the more that Black people acquire the very things that we're told in the American ideal will change your life, whether that be the high-paying job, the single-family home with a white picket fence, that there's still outcomes with death and dying that don't match the perception that those things change how people live and how they exist. That there are still heightened forms of stress that are leading people to adverse health outcomes. There are still issues within the workplace that make working in certain positions more precarious or challenging for Black people in the office place, where there are now these discourses about how to manage those microaggressions that are forever going to come at you. The question is, why do those things continue to persist? I think we have to change our narrative of what progress is. And that progress is so deeply wedded to a class ideal in the American context that it is stripped of any understanding of race and how race can become a pervasive structure, or not become, but already is, a pervasive structure that prevails even as people ascend to new higher heights, as they might like to say.
The people I came to know said and felt that the American dream is something available to you, and you don't ask questions about who else it's available to. You achieve the American dream because of the hard work you do. That if you succeed and you get it, good for you. That pride is yours, honestly. But if you fail, that also is on you. There's no excuse. It's you get the credit and you take the blame. People on the left are more likely to say, well, yeah, there's an American dream and we all want it, but getting there is caused by how you're situated in the world. What kind of family did you get born into? Was it rich? Was it poor? Were there good schools? Were there poor schools? And so to the left, there's a community behind your access to the dream. And the dream should be available to everybody. And public investment should help increase that availability. Whereas on the right, no, you build it yourself. The availability isn't socially created. And you just don't need much government to get there.
The problem that there is this powerful myth of meritocracy, that there is this belief that we really do live in a meritocratic system and anybody can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps if they just try hard. And the reality is that it is not a level playing field, it is not equal opportunity for everyone. We know from the psychological research that all else being equal, people of color will be treated more poorly. They will be given less opportunity and their behaviors will be interpreted more cynically. And that's the harsh reality. And then on top of that, we have generations of inequity that make it such that it is not equal opportunity. There are people starting from different places. And so that's a tremendous amount of inertia that has to be overcome. And so the ideal would be to get away from these thoughts about meritocracy and move toward thoughts of real equal opportunity. But that's just an abstraction. In terms of what can actually be done from a policy standpoint, is that we need to start breaking down some of the drivers of these inequities. You know, the ideal of Brown v. Board of Ed was to create integrated schools, not just numerically integrated schools, but truly integrated schools, not where you just had more black kids, but you had black and white kids actually doing things together. And that's not an ideal that we've really achieved. And now schools are starting to be even more segregated than they were before. So in education, we have a real opportunity, because education is required. And that's an opportunity, and that was the ideal of Brown v. Board of Ed, was, you know, let's integrate our schools, because that's when we can get people together during a formative stage of their lives, where we can start to hack away at these outgroup biases. The research on intergroup contact has shown, and there have been hundreds and hundreds of studies that have now been thoroughly meta-analyzed, you know, taken and quantitatively torn apart and put back together. And what the research overwhelmingly shows is that mere positive or even neutral contact with a person from another group lastingly reduces your prejudice toward that whole group. And that is something that is achievable. And it is something that was very much at the root of the Brown v. Board of Education decision.
I think the Supreme Court's decision ending affirmative action in higher education is profoundly misguided. First, it doesn't appreciate the importance of diversity in the classrooms and on campus. The education of all students is enhanced when there's diversity. Second, it equates giving a preference on the basis of race, in light of a long history of discrimination, is being the same as discriminating against racial minorities. There's a huge difference between using race to harm those who've been traditionally excluded and using race to create a more equal society. And finally, the court's misguided in its reading of history. Those who adopted the 14th Amendment in 1868 adopted many programs that were race conscious that today we would call affirmative action. Those who want to follow the original meaning of the Constitution should embrace rather than reject affirmative action.
I think what the American dream is a kind of implicit promise, and it's a promise of equality. But it's a naive promise, and it's an abused and misunderstood promise, insofar as it seems to assume that we all start from the same place.
My American dream has always been to live in a country, regardless of the color of my skin or my sexuality, where I could pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Very simple things. And given the opportunity to do that equally with everybody else. I come from a background where I was given great opportunity for an education, to move up the ranks of social mobility. Outside forces are always in my way of reminding me that I am unequal in this country. So if I were to revise the American dream for myself, and I tell people this all the time, it would just simply be to just let me live my life and leave me alone. To spend every single moment of one's life consciously thinking about race has been exhausting. Just to be left alone for me to be. That's all I ever wanted, and that is the American dream that I strive for.
I feel as though it makes some sense to put that American dream on hold, to work on another dream, which is the one that Greig just described, which is that we can all start from the same place. And in some sense, we never will, but at the very least, we need to acknowledge and understand that we don't start from the same place.
You know, it's a truism to say society should be judged according to how they treat their less fortunate, and we're failing, you know. And we've got 700,000 unhoused individuals. We're failing there. I work with people who are in prison. We're failing there, you know, and our whole culture feels it. We always have to separate power from influence. There are examples of people who had no real formal power in the world and changed world history, right? Thomas Clarkson wrote he was 19, he wrote an essay against slavery. He was just a college student. That essay got picked up by the abolitionists in England. They then started to publish facts about slave ships. And the English public was like, I didn't know we do this. And they outlawed slavery, right? It started with a 19-year-old who had no power. One of my favorite examples is Margaret Sanger, when she invented the birth control pill. You know, she had a disbarred scientist as her lead scientist, not a lot of institutional support. People thought she was crazy. And she invented a pill that changed birth rates for American women from 5.5 or so to 2.7 per lifetime. She changed history, right? And you would never have predicted it. So that's what's beautiful about power. It's also scary. We never know where it's going to go, which makes it hard to study.